1-800-985-1419 to get a free brochure. That number again is 1-800-985-1419. 1-800-985-1419.
Now let us say hello to a former convict.
Number one, what is your name, please?
My name is Frank Earl Andrews.
Number two.
My name is Frank Earl Andrews.
Number three.
My name is Frank Earl Andrews.
And here is the compelling story of Frank Earl Andrews. I, Frank Earl Andrews, spent 23 years behind prison bars. My last jail term was 55 to 67 year sentence for armed robbery. To all intents and purposes, I thought that I was as good as dead. Finally, however, I pulled myself together. I began to write, and in 1967, I sold my first story. Then, together with another prisoner, I edited an anthology of the writings of inmates in the prison. They were selections from prisoners who had served time for 30 or more years. It wasn't as easy as it sounds. In order to get the book published, we actually had to smuggle out the manuscripts. Ultimately, my seriousness of purpose convinced the parole board that they should set me free. Once again, I am living as a free man on the outside, and my prison writing experience has stood me in good stead. I am now working for a major publishing firm. Signed, Frank Earl Andrews. And let us start the questioning, please, with Miss Kitty Carlisle.
That's fascinating. Number two, I don't quite understand why you had to smuggle the manuscripts out.
Well, that's because under prison regulations, you were only allowed to write to members of your immediate family, and there's also a problem of censorship that usually comes up.
Oh, number three, do they censor mail that goes out of prisons?
In some prisons they still do, but since the recent rash of prison rebellions, they've been negotiating and loosening up on the censorship.
I see. Number one, what kinds of stories were there? Were they about personal experiences?
Both kinds. Personal experiences, plus some of the prisoners even wrote poems and just all types of stories.
Number two, now that you're out of prison after having been there 23 years, how long have you been out?
About 3 months.
3 months. Do you find it hard on the outside?
Well, it's different, that's all.
It sure must be different. Number three, what publishing firm do you work for?
Pyramid Publications.
And you, number one?
Pyramid Publication.
Uh-huh. Number two, what do you do?
Sorry, Kitty, got a buzzer going down to Gene.
Number two, are they saying Pyramid Publications?
Yes, Pyramid Publications.
Is that here in New York, number two?
Yes, they're a paperback publisher.
I see. Now, number three, if you were sentenced 55 to 67 years, normally I assume you would be eligible for parole, and after a period of time, you get time off for good behavior, you would have gotten out. When would you have gotten out if you hadn't done the book?
Well, I get off of parole in 1999.
Was the earliest you were eligible for parole?
No, I was eligible for parole 11 years.
After 11 years?
Yeah.
I see. And number one, was it helpful to write the book? Did that get you out a little sooner?
Absolutely. Without it, I would still be in.
Number two, what prison reform would you recommend more than any other since you've spent so much time? And where were you, number two?
Well, I'll answer that the other way around. First of all, I was at Joliet in Illinois, about 50 miles south of Chicago.
Yes.
And secondly, I would recommend conjugal visitations more than any other.
Mm-hmm.
And please, it takes us on to Peggy.
Thank you. Number three, do you still have to report to a parole officer?
Once a month.
Thank you. Number three, were you in Joliet as well?
No, I was in Broadway.
Broadway in Jersey. And number one, where were you?
Attica.
Oh, were you there during the riots?
Yes, I was.
Well, what do you think it would be the best thing for prison reform?
Well, a whole list of things, including better food, better treatment of prisoners, better parole procedures, and I can go on and on.
Thank you. Number two, when you're in prison, do they search your cell ever? You know, just come in and just search your cell to see what you've got in there?
Well, they can do that, but they usually don't because they've searched you so thoroughly by the time you get in, there's not much use for that.
Thank you. Number three, are there any former prisoners that have become professional writers?
Several. Edgar Smith wrote a book, Brief Against Death. He did 14 years in the death house. Reuben Hurricane Carter just wrote a book.
Thank you. Number one, had you gone to school before you went to prison? Or did you go to school during it, while you were in prison?
Both. I quit high school, I finished high school in prison, and then I took some writing courses, correspondence.
Thank you.
And finally, to Bill Cullen, please.
You know, the thing that's most disturbing about all of this, that they all seem to agree that they had to smuggle the manuscripts, smuggle things they had written. Number three, is there any legal way that a prisoner like yourself, if you indeed were he, can get your manuscript, what you have written, out to the public? Any legal way?
Now, yeah, you can do it now. This was done before, you know, they lightened up on the various rules and regulations, mostly as a result of the riots and rebellions.
For instance, number three, in what year was it that you had to smuggle your manuscript out?
1971.
Number one, do you agree that now manuscripts written in a prison about prison life or anything else the prisoner wants to write about can now be legally released and gotten out to the public?
That is correct.
Now, you, however, number one, had to smuggle yours out.
Yes.
By what means?
Well, people who visited me, I slipped the papers to them, and there's no searching of the people that go out.
When did you smuggle your manuscript out, number one?
Back in about 1968, 69.
And the improvement has been made since that time?
After those riots, a lot of improvements were made.
Number two, when you had visitors, were you able, we always picture, or we see pictures of prisoners having visitors where there is no personal contact, even finger contact made. How were you able to smuggle or get your manuscript to the people who were visiting you, if indeed you use that system?
Well, I'd really rather not tell you because a lot of people might see it and get hurt.
And is it still, thank you.
All right, friends, that's it. Game over. Time to ballot, if you will. What do you think, friends? Is it number one? Is it number two? Or is it number three? Our Miss Carlisle has to make the first move.
Oh, yeah. Well, none of them really look like jailbirds. And they all look like absolutely charming citizens. But number one has a look of a man who's lived alone a long, long time. I mean, number two. So I voted for number two.
Number two. All right, so there we go. Smack in the middle and down to Gene Rayburn.
Well, the two imposters, whoever you are, you were terrific, I'll tell you that.
Tough, yeah.
It seemed to be Gary, number three didn't have time enough to grow that long a hair if he's just been out 2 or 3 months. And number two, I don't know, I voted for him because of his answers that he gave seemed very convincing to me.
I think it was number two who said he'd only been out 2 or 3 months. I may be mistaken, Gene. I don't know. Peggy?
Well, if number two has the look of a man who's lived alone a long, long time, he wouldn't have been in jail because they're absolutely mobbed in there. So, and I didn't vote for number three because I just didn't believe him, but number one had a long list of prison reforms he wished to get through, and I feel if you've been in the can, you'd want a lot of reforms.
All right, so we got a one, and 2 twos, Bill Cullen.
Being in prison that long, I imagine whether you harden to things or don't harden, but you get a way of answering things and not being, number three had a way of answering things like they weren't, he wasn't treating them like a matter of life and death. They were facts and he answered like they were just so many facts and for that reason.
All right, that's the way it goes, friends. The votes are all in. Will the real Frank Earl Andrews please stand up? Frank Andrews. Guys, you made it tough for the panel. Let's all find out who we all are. Number one, sir, what is your real name? What do you do?
My name is Louis Kruh, and I am responsible for a dial-a-joke at New York Telephone.
Well, no. And number two, sir, tell me about yourself.
My name is J.C. Thomas, and I host a show called Talking with Thomas on teleprompter cable television.
Good enough. I understand, Frank, that you have a new book coming out. Is that so?
Yeah, in February. It's titled Pros and Cons.
Pros and Cons.
Yeah.
Well, good luck with it as well. And thank you very much, Frank Earl Andrews and friends.
It's GSN's new